And myself, Slam, and colleagues are here today to make sure that you have the information based on our work right now, which is the goal is to think about the options available for our schools to be able to build an elementary capital plan. And the options that they're going to review are one unified school, the 3 schools, new construction that we had shared the last time we've done this, and as well as a renovation demo plan to make sure that if we do renovate, that we have to be at state standards for RISE. So that's why there's 3 options. And the school committee is looking for feedback. Along the walls and on your tables is a QR code along with the URL. It's also available on our website. If you prefer to go on the website and just click it, you can fill out the feedback form as well on that. So thank you for coming tonight. I'm going to pass it over to Mark Rhodes. I'm going to start the first slide. Perfect. So why now? Rhode Island law requires us to have a 5-year capital improvement plan. The reason that is important is the last time Charahoe was involved in a building plan.
Can you put the lights down so we can read it?
Sure. Mr. Sullivan, thank you. So the last time we were involved with this plan a few years ago was because when I arrived here back in 2020, there was a plan for a unified elementary school as an option. It never went to fruition, which means that that year we didn't have a capital plan. When the law went in about 2018, every district was required to show not only a 5-year capital improvement plan for their district. If you don't have one that's approved, then what happens is you cannot get state reimbursement for your projects, which is really important because Charahoe, being a regional district, can get up to 65%. So our baseline is 61 minimum, and being regional allows us an additional 4%. The Jacobs assessment in 2017, there was some confusion around Jacobs. Jacobs gave, and now the Bureau Veritas report, those 2 reports are for the General Assembly to determine large level needs. It's a big overview of infrastructure. It has nothing to do with classrooms, nothing to do with educational expectations for the state, simply your infrastructure. And what that did was Jacobs gave you sort of a 5-year review of what should be completed in 5 years. And when Bureau Veritas comes out, that's the same thing. It's really going to be a moot point for Charahoe because this application, stage 2, is a much more robust review in our facilities, which means we're going to have more data that is available in the Bureau Veritas report because of what the state requires us to do in a stage 2 application. It requires an architect and a owner's project manager, and we have SLAM and Colliers, and they were approved on August 5th by the school committee. And then they worked very hard to get this presentation up and running for our first school committee meeting and to ensure that we could have feedback from the school committee so they could advise on making sure this was the presentation that they were ready to put forward to our community. But overall tonight, we want to make sure you understand where we've been on the timeline. I can promise you that nobody was dragging their feet. I get it. It feels like, Groundhog Day, you keep doing the same thing. But we're listening to the community, and we're getting better and better at this because we get the feedback. The more feedback we get, that helps us understand what the community is looking for, but what we've realized is there is a lot of confusion around the Charahoe Act in stage 1 and stage 2. So when you see school committee begin to submit a new stage 1, June 2024, immediately after the bond did fail last time, we went out and we siphoned out our main campus work. Not all of it, just the main key areas, because we understand that our taxpayers are trying to make sure that we balance that. So we did about $15 million first. So we have a 5-year capital plan for our secondary schools. We needed bond dollars to make sure that we could do that work, and that bond passed in November. Simultaneously, we were working on our elementary stage 1, which we submitted in February 15th, 2025. That takes some time, and I can tell you, we were hard pressed to make sure everything got there. We had a very short time, and we also had SLAM, but they have very much been involved in turning around this work for us. September 23, 2025, as you all know, was the meeting we just had, where we shared this presentation in its infancy, so the school committee could give feedback on what they would like us to hit home on, what points were important to address. And in October, they're going to make a decision. What's really important to remember tonight is to really try to keep yourself in a neutral zone. Whether you have a love of one plan or the other, the idea is that our elementary schools need something. while they're beautiful in architecture, they have lived their lives, and we had flooding last week at Richmond. And the water comes sometimes from the walls, sometimes from the ground, sometimes from the roof. Even though we have the flashing, if you walk by the front entrance, you can see some of the things that we've had to build to ensure that water does not get into the building. But that can only last for so long. These Band-Aid approaches are not going to be sustainable. Ryan will tell you, and the state General Assembly tells you, a school lives its life after 50 years because there's a majority of individuals. I mean, raise your hand if you have 460 kids running through your bathroom every day, 10 times a day. Here in Richmond, she does. But that's where we really want you to think about opportunities. And I know one opportunity that I've heard about since I arrived here was grade 5. Now, while you will not see grade 5 in the slide deck because we haven't made any decisions, if you go to a school like One Unified, right, under the last stage 2, told us we could not bring grade 5 down to elementary school due to the bonus of underutilization of the building with the middle school. However, we're preparing for a new strategic plan, and that strategic plan is really looking for the career exploratory opportunities K through 12. Ryan is very intrigued with our new work, and they said that they would absolutely be able to be on board with our work, share our strategic plan, show them that that's our direction. They think that's a very interesting, and they wouldn't allow, if it was in our strategic plan and lawfully done, us to think about moving grade 5 back in if we had a unified elementary school. So there are opportunities, so I just hope that you'll listen, open up your eyes to the opportunities, open up your voices to make sure we get your feedback, because really the community is going to decide what we put in front of our students, and you're planning not for the next 5 years or 3 years, but you're planning the education for the next 50 years, for the next generation. So this is a big, important project, and I thank you all for being here.
Thank you. My name is Mark Rhodes. I'm the design principal of SLAM. Colleague Kathy, adult principal, and Corey, one of the architects that helped put this together. This was a whirlwind for us to put together about a month and a half, basically, to get this going. But what we wanted to do was sort of step back for a second and just talk a little bit about the process. And I know there's a lot of confusion about what stage 1, stage 2, 3, and 4 means. Stage 1 is really what it says, an identification of need. It is the fact that you're submitting paperwork to the state, that you intend to develop a stage 2, which is a solution, but it's more of a master plan. So think of stage 2 as a roadmap by which you're going to get the available funding in line and promote both an academic and a construction or building solution to ride the thing through. Then you go up to stage 3 is when the rubber meets the road. That's when it becomes real. That's when an architect designs the buildings for real, looking at all the technical information that's available at that time. A lot of that does happen in stage 2, but there's a chance to revisit it in stage 3. So oftentimes stage 2, think of it as a roadmap, and stage 3 is when that roadmap is implemented. And stage 4 is a construction project closeout, all within that sort of 5-year period. Stage 4 is fun because the building is open and students and teachers occupy. As you mentioned, we were hired to look at 3 different options. The order, no preference in order, but option 1, which I'll show, is a unified school. Right now it's pre-K through 4, with alternative learning found in pre-K all on one site, a site to be determined. What I can tell you is that site is not on the main campus. It doesn't impact the middle school or high school or the fields or anything around that. Option 2, renovations and additions. We look at each of the 3 sites. There are some demolition strategies that we'll talk about. There are some parts of these buildings that are, as you mentioned, that are 50 years plus old, that don't meet modern teaching needs, safety needs, accessibility needs, those types of things. But I'll talk about that specifically with each opportunity. And then option 3 was a recap of what we presented a couple of years ago, but brought up to today's dollars and a few programmatic changes based on where we were going as a community. The upper grades on main campus remain unchanged. Again, 5th grade is something we would love to have a dialogue about should you choose to do that. There's some interesting opportunities there with the CTE environment, both at the lower school level, but also especially at the middle school level, clearing up some space to allow that to happen. But the rest of the grades remain the same for this study. Main campus remains the main campus. One of the guiding principles as we kind of looked at this, working with you all, was parity across the district. No matter what solution we looked at, we wanted the academic, educational specification to be the same no matter what option. So you can imagine that's more challenging in some than others, and we'll have some dialogue about that. We had the projected enrollment. We have to look 5 years out. Pride requires us to take a look from MESDIC, which is an organization that gives us population numbers. It's one that's recognized by the state. So 1,281 students is what we had to plan for in 2031. So whether that happens or not, anybody's best guess, but that's the projection Pride requires us to look at. When we looked at renovations and additions to each of the 3 existing schools, we wanted parity of programs and academic spaces. All the schools get the same size, type, and quantity of spaces. For instance, the gyms are the same, the cafeterias are the same, the kitchens would be the same. Because in some instances, you'd be serving more students than exists there today. Swing space would be required in any renovation or build new, if you're going to build those new buildings on the existing sites. That's an important thing. That swing space in stage 2, if that's a selected option, we have to figure that out. Provide with demand to see that, make sure that it's a pathway for success. So that's an important thing about. So we go to option 1, which is a regional or unified school. And what we've tried to do is these are going to look more designed than they actually are. They're conceptual. They're extremely conceptual in nature. To give us all the room to talk and have a dialogue and figure out whichever option you choose, we need to tailor it to what you want it to be, how you want it to look. The reality of what we said to them. We know enough because we've done enough stage 2s and we've picked up a lot of bad stage 2s in other communities where we've had to do a lot of remedial fixing. And that really wastes the time and costs money because of restoration and construction. So we want to do this part right, but we want to get a pathway that's correct for you. Whichever direction you choose, we want to make sure you're successful. So you're going to see some architecture, you're going to see some pretty pictures. Don't get too hung up on that. Let's look at what we're trying to do scholastically across the district. So, a site that is unnamed, that's on a white background. But when you look at a unified school and you start to think about that, there is an opportunity when you get about 1,281 kids together in the school. You really need to look at parent drop-offs and bus drop-off. What's a community organization for a school like that? How do you take something that may appear large and break it down into community schools within the system of spaces that work together? The benefit of a unified school is you effectively have one gym instead of 3 gyms. Or I'll make it say 1 boiler instead of 3 boilers, 1 roof instead of 3 roofs. You start to see efficiency of collecting things under 1 roof. However you organize it, there is some financial benefit to it. We'll demonstrate that in a little bit. A lot of these organizational schemes, we're big building with colors right now in Johnston for about 1,250 students. And we brought, I think, 4 schools together there. And again, it's a lot about breaking up the school into little community pods. When you think about a school of this size, in a traditional school like here, you might take a child from a particular classroom and have to run them down the hall to arts or to music or to a specialty service. When you get to schools, modern schools, you tend to move the adult. It's a lot easier to move an adult than it is to move a child and get them really focused. So these schools tend to be more an interesting model to deliver curriculum and other services to your students. It becomes very efficient. These become community centers as well. So when you think about the organization of whatever I show you, there has to be after-hours function, or during the day like OA or community events that we're having here tonight. And you need to be able to secure the rest of the school. That's what Ryan expects. So when I look down the hallway now and I can see the classroom, that's a no-no. That must be able to be secure. Okay. Check out the work.
Now, I can use my cafeteria for it. That's nice.
The other benefit, when you think of a multi-purpose field, you think about gathering your community, extra athletic fields, things that you could do when you unify a school and take three schools put them together. Your playgrounds are different, the play fields, multi-purpose, or smaller children play or protected play. There's a lot of different opportunities when you think about that. When you go to the planning of it, and we've done a lot of these types of schools, what's interesting is you kind of focus around like the main street. There's kind of a central spine. When you think of CALA and sort of an early childhood wing, that's almost like a school within a school. It has its own separate entry, its own separate support services, administrative functions. You have the benefit of being able to go down to use the cafeteria or the media center or the gym for movement if you want, but you don't have to. All that's built into sort of that wing. When you look at the other first and third grade, there's a second floor on top of those, you can sort of figure out how you want to team teach, whether you want first and second on this floor, third and fourth upstairs, you want first and second stacked vertically. You have a lot of opportunities. The orange or pinkish space are learning communities. We need to start to develop expanded learning opportunities, so we're bringing students into that for STEAM or STEM-related functions. You could think about art could happen in there, science could happen in there. It could be specific to the thematic area of that group. We know your three schools have three thematic areas right now. You could replicate that in a school like this. So you could have sort of more of a STEM or environmental function, getting direct access to the outside. You tend to need two cafeterias with a shared kitchen. That's quite a bit of students to run through lunch. So you want to sort of have the ability to separate into two, the gym and media center administration. So buses would drop off on the right, parents generally on the left. Special services would drop off in the back upper left corner.
So one of the unique opportunities with the unified school is that our students, regardless of need, are in one school. And it would be intentionally designed. So if you have a pre-K child and a kindergartner, right now you have to go to Charlestown. If you're in pre-K, but you may be closer to Richmond. That's where the pre-K program is. So it allows us, regardless of services, whether it's a clinical day program like we have at CALA, or at our self-contained alternative learning classrooms at Richmond and Charlestown, it allows all of our opportunities and our resources to be in one place. So students are not waiting for a teacher who's traveling. They have that support built right into the school. The other thing is that I heard about when I first did this 6 years ago, when people were concerned about scores, they were concerned about assessment, they were concerned about achievement, as they should be. And what I can tell you is, and I have research that will be in the FAQ, there are lots of schools that are large, actually a lot of them in the Midwest and the South, that do very well. Now, with that being said, we have different standards, but if you look at standards across, then what you would see is that we can provide you with data that shows you that with intentional design and building a large school but with community in mind and smaller learning communities. So don't get caught up on a rendering. This is just an idea. This is not our idea. This is to give you an example of what is possible. So if you say, oh, well, I would want the first grade and the second grade to be together. That's something we do in stage 3. This is just to show you, what we have to do is we have to show why. Stage 1, it's like going to the dentist. Stage 1 is you make sure you do your cleanings, you make sure you're doing that proactive kind of thing, but you tell them, they see if there's anything wrong and what has to be fixed. So in stage 1, here's all of the work on the facilities, and then stage 2 is how are you going to fix it? What's your plan to bring it up to state level requirements? So this year, the school committee is doing is they're asking, again, out of these options, we've heard a few things. Unified school, we've heard one school in every town, and we've heard we want to see what it would cost to renovate and demo the schools to state standards. Is that more cost efficient? So that's what you're going to see today, but please don't get caught up on where things are. The other thing I want you to think about with the unique opportunity is your exploratory programs. So right now, Charlestown focuses on outdoor learning, Richmond focuses on health and wellness work, and Ashley focuses on STEAM. Now every child in Charter House has access to all of the opportunities, not based on where they go to school. So that is another opportunity that we have by making sure that we really are one unified district. But again, there's pros and cons to all options, but there is no right or wrong way to do it. It really is about the community investment and what you want to see in the next 50 to 100 years.
Thank The other thing, when you unify a school, it gives you scalability. We know you have kind of a bubble going through, a lot of second graders coming through the communities. Currently, in a building like this, you have the ability to take some first and third grade classrooms and use them for that purpose. No matter what the school or the solution you see up here, the capacity we design for isn't really the 1281 because of the way the numbers work. It's about 1350. So there is already capacity built into the schools, what we're showing you today. You will see numbers on the bottom of the screen. I will summarize that in the end. Those are construction dollars. That's the bricks and mortar, what it would cost a contractor to build a school in that particular place for each of the opportunity schemes. But I'll summarize that for all of you in the end. When you look at potentially a second floor, there's an opportunity, so as Gina mentioned, it could be second to fourth grade, it could be whichever grade range you want to make. Even in this condition, you could put first grade on the second floor, which I told you typically can't. You have to provide separate egress capacity for first graders. They can't go down the same set of stairs as a second grader. Even though in the same house, potentially, they can't egress in the building in the same way. But you could do that, you could figure that out. So you have a lot of flexibility. And the upper quadrant of that plan is effectively a community center after hours. When you think about voting, the type of things that they have to do, there are a lot of opportunities to use that space as community space and really leverage the school very, very well. Again, I won't dwell on this too much. This is just a very quick, we have to show renderings to ride. We have to show that something that proves the cost. So effectively, break in looking at your community and the way your architecture is around all three towns. We really look to bring the architecture together. It really buys a master plan approach. I can't tell you that's going to be for that window right there. That's for stage 3 to figure out. What we want to know is that the dollars that we represent in stage 2 are the amount of dollars you need to construct the school. That's what this is about. When we look at the additions and renovations, and this is where it gets extremely complicated, these were very difficult for us to sort out. The existing schools, they're extremely well maintained. The communities do a wonderful job of maintaining the schools. Yes, you have an old slate roof, that's going to leak. That happens with slate, there's no movement when you get up here. But the buildings are generally very well maintained. The problem is the spaces are smaller than Ride would like to see. The average classroom, if I look at all three of the schools across the district, are about 550 square feet, rough number. Ride requirements are 900 square feet. Now, Ride does allow us to tax that 900 and build 850 if we expand and take that 50 square feet and put it to expanded learning opportunities. But if we weren't to do that, Ride wants 900 square foot classrooms because they're very pragmatic because they have to provide parity across the state when you start to think about that. So I'll go through each of the sites. I'll start with Ashway, which is a cute little building with a lot of cowwall and some late 50s, 60s roots. When we look at each of these buildings, we've walked these buildings, we've looked at the mechanical systems, we've looked at the site, we've looked at your septic systems, we've looked at all the utilities around to try to figure out, okay, how do we take this facility and add more students to it, make it bigger, and make it a modern teaching environment? Because when RIDE looks at a project like this, they want to say renovate to new. That means the windows, new walls, new roof, new mechanical systems, everything's new. They want to be able to say that in place of building a new school, we've utilized some of the existing bones to our benefit. So when we looked at Ashway, that little red box represents the amount of square footage that we would take away to be able to clear some space to put some new square footage back. That's a one-story addition, and the classrooms aren't really the right size. It takes up a really good spot on the site. So if we were to demolish that, we'd be able to clear the room, or what you see is that sort of lighter gray U-shaped object in the front. So what we're trying to do in each of these things is show the same size gym, so I'm not cheating, the same size cafeteria, the same size kitchen, the same expanded learning spaces throughout the mall. So you can sort of see the sites they're good size, but they're very narrow. So we'll say from east to west or left to right on the screen, we're filling sort of side to side within the setbacks, the zoning setbacks. There is some site behind, but that is at an elevation that's up. So it's harder to construct something on and maintain sort of integrity. You know, what we have here upstairs, getting the classrooms, a lot of difficulty for those that may be in a wheelchair or may have crutches temporarily to get through the building. That could be staff, that could be students. In each case, we want to think about parent drop-off, bus drop-off, try to make the circulation better than it is today, so you don't have those conflicts that happen, especially because we're going to put more students here. When you think about that. From a planning point of view, we can certainly make it work. We can get administration in a good spot so you have a safe, secure entrance. Right, requires a carded main entrance. What that means is you come through the doors, it's, I can't even say this, but we do it all too well. Ballistics glazing, ballistics drywall, you're checking in for security measures, you're not getting into the school, even at that point, you're being checked into the lobby, so there's sort of multiple levels of security you get through before you're escorted to where you need to be or allowed to be somewhere. We take that very seriously. We even, in this case, try to get the medians into the gym to be somewhere near the front door the best we can to create that community space. Because of the existing building layout, the cafeteria is off in the back. We could certainly use that after hours and close out some capacity in the wings of this scheme. That would work just fine, but it's not really connected to take advantage of the front door. So your folks come in, easy access to get in. This one does have a second floor, which we need to get the square footage and to get the classrooms in. So third and fourth grade, flex classrooms, because you want to have, give you the ability, whether that's for other services you haven't thought of yet in your curriculum, or you have those extra kids that need second grade class, third grade class, fourth grade, so on. Second grade, restrooms and other things we need to provide within the school. Again, a little different look than what I showed before, the gray sort of stucco blocks with the alamo. Tries to be, in this case, just showing a modern, light-filled, welcoming entrance as the community comes in, or students come in. Again, just a concept. Doesn't have to look like this, we just have to represent. When we look at Charlestown, another very unique building, another 60s flat roof, outwall under. There used to be big windows. The older buildings are interesting because they used to use natural ventilation. They'd have windows that open low and open high, and you just have convection on air through. That was a cool way of doing air conditioning. Then we ended up putting cow wall and kind of different heating systems and kind of changed that whole dynamic. Unfortunately, it's hard to go back there. When we look at Charlestown, and there's a little bit more in that red box. Actually, I got a little smaller demo. We had to clear a bunch of site to get more capacity in here. This was the site that was also going to get pre-K. And pre-K was a large number of classrooms. Pre-K classrooms tend to be 1,000 square feet versus the 900 square feet for a normal classroom. They also have to include a separate bathroom for students. They can't have a pre-K student go running up the hall because they may never come back and lose them. So you kind of have to contain them within the space. We've seen runners. When you look at the site, what we're trying to do is that, again, that light gray box is the amount of addition. Now, this is a single-story addition. So this does add to the complexity. It takes a lot of footprint to get the same size gym, media center, cafeteria, kitchen, all the support spaces that we showed in Ashway or the unified scheme. Parent drop-off, bus drop-off. And when we first looked at the site, we said, hey, where it says site, we love to put something there. It's a mountain. You know, and you have a lot of ledge and granite, so knocking that down, very difficult. We did do that in Johnston. You might want to talk to the neighbors about how much you show your houses when we're trying to do that. It's very complex and very expensive to take that space and bring it down to the level to be able to build. So we chose to not tax this site unfairly, and we said, let's try to make it work. When we look at the planning, we try to create sort of an early childhood, pre-K, kindergarten area that could have a separate entrance. Again, that drop-off for parents is a little different than coming out of bus or dropping off a third grader. There's a direct handoff from parents to the teacher, student in the building. We try to create that same sort of administrative suite, secure lobby entrance, media center gym, the platform like this, open both for the gym and the cafeteria, the kitchen, so that becomes that civic public zone, and then you can lock the doors down after hours, and all the classrooms can be secure if you want to have a community function. Learning commons, expanded learning both at the early grades and at the later grades. So we're, again, that expanded learning for pre-K could be a movement space, the little tricycles, sort of burn some energy, as they need to sort of get out of the classroom and move around quite a bit. There's an opportunity for protected play so they can get directly out to that courtyard that's fenced in. Again, their play is very different. It's also, I think, 75 square feet per student. It is, Brian has numbers for that, and those are national numbers as well. So there's lots of things that we have to follow. Again, it could work, it just takes up a large amount of site and doesn't leave a lot of parking, and the flow of buses and parent drop-offs is a little compromised. Again, just trying to do similar aesthetics across all of the things that we're showing. Again, so the cost factors are involved. We really want an apples to apples comparison to the best of our ability, so we all can ask great questions and make decisions based on what you think is the correct direction for it. When we look at where we are now in Richmond, and it's a beautiful historic building. Boy, I wish we didn't enter at a split level. We face the stairs right away when you come in. And you can see it with all the additions that have happened over time. You're dealing with the topography of the land, and if I'm in a wheelchair or on crutches, boy, it's really difficult for me to get around. So you think about moving more students through a facility to the right locations, with ramps and elevators, it gets very complicated. So when we looked at this, we decided, let's keep the historic front piece, and we'll sort out how to use that to its best and highest use. If we were to get rid of all of those corridors and different elevations, when you think about it, there is more surface area in window and wall that can leak because it's a single story and it's about as spread out as you can make it. So there's more circulation. You can't get from the far right to the far left without going all the way down and around. So it takes a lot of time. So this is the biggest of the demos in terms of land footprint. What we do is we look at putting something back in a very symmetrical historic building. We look at leveraging the courtyard and the light gray spaces, the addition, the dark gray hatch is what remains. Again, we have a large site area. We don't want to touch the fields. We don't want to touch the greenhouse. We don't want to touch some of the things that are very successful. But we know we have to add a lot of square footage in the back behind the historic building. Look at bus drop-off, parent drop-off, and try to keep those separate. This is one site that is relatively easy to do that. You have a little bit more elbow room compared to the others. And when we look at the planning, the first floor main levels, the big image on the upper right, the lower levels on the left, lower left. Using the lower level for media center and some of the other specialty support spaces doesn't come without its complexity. We have to figure out how to get elevators in and out or ramps to make up the levels there. We are able to get pods of third and fourth or first and second or however you want to mix it up. Expanded learning and learning commons, the cafeteria, the gym, and the platform in between. You have the ability to lock down classroom spaces, after hours to use the community spaces of the building for community, gym, cafeteria, things like that. Media center might be a little more difficult because right now we've got a place in the lower level of this building overlooking that corridor. From a street presence, you wouldn't notice a lot of difference, but what we do is collect all the architecture in the back into a much smaller footprint, less spread out like a spider, kind of looks like a spider's legs. We sort of consolidated, create purposeful spaces, expanded learning environments, get the building organization put together in a way that works for a modern elementary school. of what we looked at was what we looked at a couple of years ago now. We have updated the numbers, looked at some planning changes, but again, the option for each of these sites to have, in this case, like something within the stage 2, it's a prototype proof of concept. This isn't necessarily what actually gets built, but it proves the ride that we have the ability to do this within a 5-year window. These are difficult because you have to knock buildings down, just like the renovation additions, you have to find swing space. You can't really do this with kids in the facility. It would be not possible. So each of these, because we can change the orientation on the site and maximize the usefulness of the site, it does allow a little bit more flexibility, better bus drop-off, better parking, parent drop-off, those types of things. The planning organization, not too dissimilar from everything I've shown, the idea of more of the larger functions off on one side and classroom functions on the other side, with the ability to lock those down. Again, use everything for community space. Want to do a rec basketball game, you could certainly do that. These do have a second floor, but like many of the schemes, just get the capacity, get the number of classrooms we would need on the site. Charlestown is blue, color, purple. Fits pretty reasonably on site. You can see the footprints get smaller because they are 2-story schools at this point. We get to idealize the drop-offs for parent and bus, utilize the site more effectively, try not to hit the beach fields and some of the other things that we need to deal with. So very similar planning, again, for an apples-to-apples comparison between all the schemes. Second floor. Each of these had a different thing I should mention. This had more of your inclusive classrooms. The previous scheme had the CALA as part of it. That's where there's a CALA. In Charlestown, we have the inclusive classrooms. In Richmond, as we look at it, again, very similar concept. Fits on the site, takes up less building area than what you currently have, footprint on the site. Maintains parent drop-off, bus drop-off, all the fields, greenhouse. It fits actually really well. In planning, this gets the pre-K, it's in this scheme, and those are interchangeable based on what you feel you need in terms of whether pre-K should be here, valid here, or something vice versa, in the location to make that work. Again, what I'm going to show you in cost. We're going to show you costs represent construction dollars. We did want to talk about some of the funding guidelines provided by GRAD. So, approximately, because Ollie's a wizard at math, not working it. 80% of the RIDE eligible funding is used for construction. Rule of thumb. There are things that go outside of that number that we'll talk about in a minute. When we talk about soft costs, those are not hard bricks and mortar things. That could be these architects, engineers, other folks. Think of things like any testing and stuff like that. Soft costs also have FF&E technology. So if you think about a building and you were take it, turn it upside down, shake it out, anything that fell out was FF&E. So it's not generally provided by the contractor. Provided afterward, but RIDE does get funding for that on a per student basis. So it's $2,100 per student for FF&E, $30,000 per student for technology. It's just a way of looking at a total overall bucket of money available for RIDE for this opportunity.
So this is one thing I want to clarify when Mark said about the 80% RIDE eligible funding. So when RIDE reviews our plan, 80% of that plan is focused on construction costs. That's not to confuse with the 61% reimbursement on the dollars. That's where I think I want to make sure that that's clear, because that can be confusing. So why did you say 61 and 5% at the beginning, and now it's 80%? 80% is for construction costs of our overall plan. The 61% to the additional 4% is our reimbursement rate. So there are two different formulas that RIDE uses for that purpose. So the soft costs, like Mark said, and I always like the way Holly explains it to me, is you take the school and you sort of dump it out. Anything that's not brick and mortar falls out, that's your soft cost. For example, the swing spaces our soft costs. So if you had to take over a space and get it sort of ready for our kiddos to move in, Bride does reimburse you for any needs you have to have during the swing space usage. But in the end, obviously, their goal is to make sure that 80% of the money that they give you goes into the construction, not into the other ancillary opportunities. Did I get that correct, Mark? I want to make sure I'm explaining. Holly is the expert. So Holly, come over here, and Holly's going to give you that. And while she gets up, I just want to share, one of the questions we had again about the grade 5 was, is an opportunity to move grade 5 back if we have 3 elementaries? That's a harder sell for Ryan, let me tell you why. Parity is going to be hard, because then you have to run, for example, if we want to run our agriculture program, bring it down to middle elementary. As you all know, we do a lot of the waste management work, the farm to school, we have our greenhouses. Ryan would say that you do that 3 times. That's not sustainable. So that's a harder sell. So if that's sort of the opportunity, and I can tell you, the countries that are outperforming the U.S. for the last 50 to 100 years have had career and tech opportunities at the forefront for a long, or 100 years at least. We're kind of late to that game, even though it seems like, Charahoe is really good at this. We could be a national leader because in the U.S. today, we don't really do a great job of keeping up with our international friends when it comes to this work. But this gives us an opportunity. But that's where Brian's going to have a hard time understanding that how are we going to replicate grade 5 in all these 3 schools and allow this opportunity for career exploration down to the kindergarten level.
Okay, so there's a very specific formula that Brian allows. You take the student count times a certain square footage per student, and then when you have that number, that's the square footage of the school that's allowed, and then you multiply it by, they get $564 a square foot. So that's what you qualify for construction and soft costs. So you have construction, which is typically about 80%, soft costs, which is typically your engineers, your architects. Okay.
Madam Chair, we can't make out what you're saying.
Oh.
Right in there, that's better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Of course, sorry about that. When we calculate what you qualify for, it's a formula that's driven by Ryan. It's the student count multiplied by a certain square footage per student. That gives you the square footage of the school that they allow. And then they multiply it by a number of $564 right now for elementary school. That's what you qualify for the construction and soft costs. On top of that, there are other costs. Typically, that's the FF&E, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. That's the IT, which Mark had mentioned. They're very generous with those numbers. And then if it's a new construction, it would be land acquisition. If there's remediation, they allow about $1 million that they extra for remediation. And then there's also the swing space, if in fact you're renovating or building new and not a unified large school. So it's a calculation, and that's basically what you qualify for. And then the percentage of that, that's the 61.4, that's what you get back. So those are the differences, right? One is what you qualify for, so you get a maximum award from Ryan, and the other is what you get reimbursed for, which is the 61 plus the 4% bonus points.
It's good to use allows me to do that in state for 10 years now. What I wanted to do is kind of summarize the options that we have looked at and studied for you all. Again, option 1 on the top of the screen is a unified school. What you're seeing in the yellow is just that construction dollars, that sort of 80% plus or minus number. Doesn't include the soft costs. The reason why we show a range up to a low side to a high side is we believe that RIDE will give an escalation boost again in the fall. It usually comes soon, we hope, fingers crossed. I think they skipped last year, did the year before. We're expecting they're going to do that this year. That could be.
While we're waiting, we do have 3 school committee members here that joined us this evening. Unless I missed someone, Louise Ismo, the chair of the school committee, Tricia Poole,
option 2, which is a renovate to new, that kind of falls in the middle range of what we're seeing, from about 89.8 to about 98.1. There is a benefit to keeping some of the existing schools. We're not keeping a lot of it. We're keeping the floors, the steel, the wood that supports it. The walls are getting removed, the windows are getting removed. We're taking down the structural frame. So what you're seeing is the value of what we're leaving effectively, right? So it is a little bit more money than doing in high school. Think about it as well. You have 3 boilers, 3 roofs maintained, 3 air conditioning systems, all those things, 3 kitchens, 3 gyms, all those things cost a little bit more than doing a unified school. And not surprisingly, given the construction costs have gone, doing 3 new schools, like ripping completely down and putting new schools in their place is, right, as of right now, the most expensive option. The range would be 102.6 to about 104.9. There's just a lot that has to go into those. That's demoing the building, you have to debate it still, just can't knock it down. That becomes interesting because of the abatement. There are some more costs associated with that. And new construction for 3 new schools is the most expensive option. Option 2 is in the middle. Option 1 right now, with the information we have, seems to be the least expensive option. There are different programmatic things, that's just dollars, right? When you start to look at programmatic opportunities, taking it out of the context of the town, the unified school gives you the most programmatic flexibility, followed by the new schools, followed by the renovations. So it's kind of like an inverse when you start to think about how the dollars are getting spent towards an academic quality for your students in the community.
Does the unified school, is there any budget in there for land?
That would be separate because we don't know what that is.
So in addition to the 89, we're talking whatever land.
But it's reimbursable. That's the big difference.
Like bond council, it's soft cost, there's a lot of other things that we have to do that they would consider soft cost, but it is reimbursable, like when we would have to do the bond legislation again and things
The
like that.
same percentage?
It's 60.
Yes, so 61 plus the regional bonus of 4%.
Yeah.
Are all 3 of these options, RIDE would pay for roughly around 80%?
No.
But not for option 2?
No.
Not for any.
No.
Not for any.
So RIDE will reimburse you for 61 plus 4% for your regionalization, so 65% total.
The bonuses that, maybe that's the right confusion. The bonuses from last time, General Assembly had more bonuses available, so this last time in preschools, it was an 81% reimbursement. The 80%.
Okay.
Right. The 80% that we talked about here is that RIDE with their formula, 80% of our costs based on that formula must be for construction.
But, so.
We'll get up to 69%.
So I see construction in option 1 and in option 2, but I don't see the word construction in option 2. So does that mean RIDE isn't doing 80%, is my question?
No, it's
Okay, it's not a total for me. Okay.
So the complexity with additions and renovations is with this RIDE has in recent years been going away from additions and renovations. Renovate to do is the term they like to use. But with the escalated construction environment, there's very little you can do to control costs, and you often find unforeseen conditions that could be detrimental. They may not be there, but they may be there. You may have a slab that has to get ripped out because hydrostatic pressure driving the water through. That's nobody would ever thought about in this building 90 years ago or other buildings 50 years ago. So there are risks in those. There tends to be more dollars in reserves in terms of contingency dollars for your contractor for unforeseen.
For the land piece on option 1, when would you expect to find a site? And then where the stage process?
So we would need a letter of commitment. It doesn't have to close, but we would need a commitment. We have to show a site to RIDE, right? RIDE has to be able to say, okay, you found a site, it's suitable for the number of acres we would need to develop a school like this.
sell it to you. Just so everyone knows, we would, based on ride standards, we would have to get it appraised, and we would pay the appraised assessed value. So they can't mark up the prices because it's not allowable. But that's, yeah, we have had a few landowners, or two or three, Suzanne, I think it's at least 2 or 3 that have reached out, and that we've actually reviewed the land in our office.
Thank you. Yes.
If the unified method is picked, what happens to the other 3 properties?
So we don't own those 3 properties, that would be a town council decision, so I mean, I'm sure they have their own ideas, but in the end, they could do what they chose with their land and with their school building if we went to the unified opportunity.
It'd be interesting to know what those plans are before anything is done.
I have no control over the town councils, like, I can't do that, that's something that's outside of our realm, that's something the town councils would have to think about as a whole. I mean, I know everyone's looking for economic development, so I do think in some rural towns where our students are looking for fields, looking for recreational facilities, there's a lot of municipality grants right now where you can think about those opportunities.
I just have a couple questions. When you discuss parity amongst the districts, for either the reno to new or new construction, I'm assuming that would then look at redistricting for the district again to balance out those schools?
So if we went for the, yes.
If we did the 3, we would, well, it depends, we may not have to, because if we do the 3 new schools, we've already redistricted for that, because basically we moved everyone to the, based on their residence. So you're going to the school closest to your residence. So the map as it stands wouldn't change for Reno. The only time, and actually it wouldn't change for any of these, because in the end, unified, they're all going to one place, and we've already redesigned the district, so we wouldn't have to redesign again.
Okay, because it looked like each of the schools had 3 tracks, but Richmond doesn't have 3 tracks right now. We have 4 and 5.
We designed the neighborhoods to be able to do that. So everyone right now goes to their closest school. And for example, let's say it looks like in our population studies that there is not going to be more enrollment. I know people talk about like the Brushy Brook and Hopkinton and things like that. That's all reviewed based on permit pulled in your town councils, building permits, all of that work gets pulled, and then they project out 10 years. That's required by RIDE. We would actually, Mr. Zenian is already working with NESDEC because they'll be giving us another review after the October 1st date to be able to do the next 10-year study.
Just for clarification, the sweet space would also get reimbursed at that 61 plus 4? Okay. And then, where are the questions? And I think you touched on this, but with the reno to new, there's the possibility, especially if we think about like this school and the flooding that happens in the basement, could incur additional costs. How does that get built in? Because if we go out to bond for a certain amount and then it goes over that amount because we incur this bigger fix than we anticipate, what does that look like?
So typically, when projects are set up, and we work, especially when we work with colliers, there's contingency, right? So the owner would have some contingency dollars set aside within that number.
Okay.
That would cover some of those things. You can imagine, like preschools, you could find pre-large things, that could be a problem, that could eat that up. Also, if you go CM at risk, which is typically the way these projects would be delivered with size and schedule complexity, CMs carry about 2.5 to 3%.
CM is a construction manager.
Construction manager, sorry.
I remember that from hearing it in school.
Yes, I have a lot of acronyms, but they carry 2.5 to 3% contingency dollars as well. But we can't go over the number. So,
Okay.
Right.
So you're already, you're essentially building it in that those issues could come up.
Within reason.
Right, because I mean, looking at Reno 2 for Richmond, I am concerned about still utilizing the basement space
Me too.
because it flooded last week,
Yes,
so.
I heard about that. So you have questions?
I have 2 questions. One is, I'm looking at the projection of how you get paid. You're planning to build for close to 1,300 students, but right now I think we have 1,100. And the school population in this area has been decreasing for 10 years. So, are we setting ourselves up to not get paid the way, was it Newport you were talking about the other night? Didn't get paid because they didn't have, they had too many.
We have 1281 as of today. And they have to incorporate pre-K, and we have to incorporate the homeschoolers. But the number right now in the district is 1281. For elementary, pre-K to 4. If you add in grade 5, it's an additional 200.
Right, so again, you gotta understand, stage 2 is about setting the table for stage 3. What you want in stage 2, honestly, is the largest population NESDEC will show, because that'll get you the most dollars from the state reimbursement. When you get to stage, but when you get to stage 3, you design for reality.
You can what?
Design for reality. You do not have to design for that number officially. So you right size based on what's going on. We do that all the time, but for this, we have to get you the most that we can.
Okay, so my other.
So just to clarify that, the question about Newport. So, Newport actually went to one unified elementary school, and they just rebuilt their high school because they were seeing decreases in enrollment. So that was their opportunity to change course. What happened was when Newport first went out pre-COVID, there was a larger number. We all know what happened during COVID, a lot of people started to leave, and Newport saw decreased enrollment. So they still wanted to build a high school at the original price, but they had lower enrollment. RIDE doesn't allow for that unless the town, the taxpayers say, like Barrington did, no, we'll give it to you. But they're arguing that point based on enrollment. So RIDE's not going to give us more money if our reality of enrollment doesn't exist. So right now we have 1281 for pre-K through 4, and then you have 1481 if you go to grade 5. And then what they'll do is they give us that number, but in essence, for example, let's say, the town say, well, we want to make sure there's 2 gyms. Then they'll give us a square footage, and anything up over that, they won't reimburse you with 61 to 5%. So that's where, I think there was a lot of confusion last time about, oh, well, where are all the offices? Do resource teachers get office? Nope, because with the law, with the MTSS law that passed, you have to make sure those resources are integrated into your classroom settings. So you can do it, but RISE's not going to reimburse you for it.
My second question was, we are going from 580 or 90 square feet per class to 900. How many students are in the 500 class, and how many are going to be in the 900 class?
Too many in the 500, I'm guessing.
Okay.
So we have to design based on your contract, right, your teacher contract. So I believe it's up to 25 is the capacity.
Right, our contract says it's up to 25, so what we're saying is, right now, RIDE is not gonna let you renovate a classroom to keep 500 square feet. That's not allowable. It's because the state laws, well, their regulations say you have to be at 900 feet. So you can't say, well, we don't want that, and else we'll let them do it and you pay every dollar. Which is why we also, when we heard last time that we could go out with the Charitable Act to get money, you can, but RIDE's not gonna reimburse you for that project, so you're gonna be paying dollar for dollar instead of the reimbursement rate.
So are you saying there'll be the same number of students in the 900 square feet room that there are in the 500 square feet room?
Not necessarily, because in some cases you got 60 children in the room, just can't fit, right? There are some very tiny, I said an average, right? But you have some bigger, some smaller, depending on what school you're in.
Well,
But
the
we have
900
to,
is average.
right, so we have to design for 25 students
Like
per.
pre-K is 1,000 square feet.
Right, the pre-K number, I think, is 21, because that's a mandated number.
Those are, if you're interested in this, it'll be on the FAQ. So the school building authority regulations show the square footage by grade, by library media room, by gymnasium. That's all laid out on RIDE's website. And it's in our FAQ that will line right up.
So in theory, we may just have bigger classes.
Right, the expectations is that the 500 square feet is not conducive for 21st century learning. When we say 21st century learning, people can get confused, but it's the opportunity for us for the collaborative spaces, the flex spaces. Literally, when kids want to sort of break out, we put them in the hallways, we put them in here, we put them all over the building, but it's not conducive to where the schools that are at 900 square feet, those classroom spaces are built in, so the collaboration happens within the school classroom and not all over the place, trying to find out how to fit them.
I have a few questions. When we're looking at the unified school, last time, I know it was brought up at the school committee meeting the other night. Would that be a decision, like if I were to vote on this, I would want concrete answers. Would there be an answer by then?
Yes, if the school committee, decides on the option, let's say it's October 21st, they say they want the unified school to go forward, they have the ability to bring back policy like transportation to say, to ensure, they're gonna say, if the unified school passes, we're gonna move up bus time no more than 45 minutes, no more than 35 minutes, whatever it is, to be a range maybe, 30 to 45 minutes if your grades pre-K through to things like that. So the school committee has purview over those policies and that can change based on their review.
But that would be decided before we were going to vote on it.
I would say, based on what I know, I can't speak for the school committee, but what I can tell you is I think that if that was a holdup, they would absolutely review that to be able to make sure our parents felt confident that we were gonna make sure our youngest learners had the shortest rides.
And then, when looking at that, I know you said this is just stage 2 and it can change. Has there been any thought about if it was a new construction unified school, being one building, but separating it more like, instead of by grade, separating it like, this is our pre-K 2, and this is our pre-K.
Oh, yeah, like an upper and lower, that's stage 3, so absolutely, that's something we can
Because like,
design.
somebody might vote differently, myself, obviously, like looking at all of those grades together and having to be together for a number of different reasons. I might not go for it, but I might go for it if it's very separated, even though it's within one building.
So, for example, like Mark showed, you could literally have that same spine, but you would be like, you would part them out like that early learning pre-K K1 as an example, and then 2 through 4. And if you wanted 5, maybe you could K1, 2, and then 3, 4, and 5. That's something that the design can happen based on the space. Like we're looking at approximately, at least 30 acres, to be able to really spread out, so you have that enough where everyone can access the resources they want, but have that space away.
What I want to say is what we're trying to do, answer.
Go ahead, yes.
So what we're trying to do is get a concept out there that apples. If whatever option gets chosen to move forward on the 21st of October, we then have to go into a way more in-depth process, likely some more of these types of meetings to present that work to you. So we've heard your feedback. Now I've heard that question, again, depending on the land opportunity, I could look at organizing the building any way that works for the educational component and for the community's components.
Because I also, like, there's only one gym.
The gym is bigger, so
How does that work with that number of students?
the gyms are subdivided with curtains. These gyms are almost 2.5 times the size of the current spaces in college gyms, so they are huge comparatively. So we are able to subdivide by dropping a curtain, so you have 2 classes in it each time.
But 2 classes with a school that size, I still, schedules-wise, would love to see.
Mark.
As an elementary educator.
What's different than the middle school, when I first got to the middle school, there were 400 students, one gym. We
Well,
didn't-
So like in the past, so I would not want to see 4 kindergarten classes having schools, gym at the same time.
So,
Same.
for example, you could
Even if it's
say,
divided, I would not, as a first grade teacher, would not.
yep, you could design, you could have 2 gymnasiums, which wouldn't necessarily be regulation, because, like, for example, like if you wanted that, because ride levels pay for certain square footage, so we could say we want 2, or maybe we don't do recreational, but we are gonna do some visits, and if I don't know if districts are in, if they have any new construction.
Yes, we do.
Okay,
We
so-
already went through it, so I've lived it.
So actually, me too, because my own children have gone through trade spaces and all that. And the gym in their building, which is, it would be half, there's about 450 kids. It is enormous. It's enormous.
So even like music class, how is everyone getting music
So,
class?
you have to think about, when you break down a unified school into community schools within that, you deliver those services within that community. So those detention spaces, which I'd love to give you all the term.
So art would be like on a cart, is that what you're saying?
No. Convention center is a very
It's
different
a very
concept.
different concept. It is souped up, set up for everything that you can do in there. And it is usually almost 3 times the classroom size. These are large spaces that sit at hubs for that group of students, whatever grade levels you put together. It works really well. Johnston has embraced it. Other communities across the country that deal with much larger populations have embraced it. It's a way of delivering curriculum without again moving that student to 8 mark down the car corridor, taking 15 minutes to get there and 10 minutes to resettle, and then period's already up.
Right, so nothing, in a convention space, nothing is on a cart. The space is from multiple uses. So regardless of, if a teacher wanted to go in and have that opportunity to build on the music program, they also have access to the Da Vinci space. So it allows for that flex opportunity.
And I think early grade ranges, the question here is that early grade ranges, we typically provide separate movement space. We wouldn't want to mix the pre-K into a gym. It's just not the right thing to do. We provide that within the early childhood. So there would be a separate movement space for them, separate from the gym.
How much of the factor, like you talked about demolition, in all these, in option 2 and 3, a lot of these schools were all 1950s, 1940s. We know this hazardous materials in schools, asbestos is there. How much is factored into this as far as that? Are you kind of giving that a small number, or how are you weighing it?
We have factored, we have studied that, so we know what's here. The last time we did the stage 2, unless you reheated it, it didn't make my life easier. It's still there. We factored that. We are adding more students in some instances, but what's there is so small, it doesn't cover what Ryan would like to see today.
So we have to make sure that if we're going to use RIDE dollars to get the reimbursement, we have to bring it up to the standards of the state, which is 900 square feet minimum.
Sorry, there was a.
So, I understand that the mystery property that's potentially available is in the town of Richmond. And I think with the one school option, location is going to factor into a lot of people's decision. So given that, are any of the existing elementary school sites of sufficient size to put a unified school?
No,
Not even Charlestown?
not even close.
With the field next to it?
Not even close.
How much did you say? 8?
About 30, and then the issue with Charlestown too, we looked at the last time, because there's a lot of ledge. So it would bring up the cost.
We might be able to fit the building proper, but there would be no parking on those agricultural fields.
So again, and I guess maybe this would be a question for Mr. Zinnia. Have we explored the option of potentially seeing if there's anything in either of the other two towns?
We actually, prior to City Attorney, Ned and I have. And there was one that even the town manager brought up to us, but we would have to, they wanted a market value, not a appraised value. It would have cost us $5 million, which that provider said absolutely not. It was right by the highway, which as a mother, I can't imagine I want my youngest, little one by the highway. So that's not, it wasn't a good site. They didn't own it. I understand that the towns want their buildings, right? But this is about kids. And I'm not saying that you're not saying, you're putting it out there, and you're saying,
Whatever comes out, I want it.
So as someone, again, I don't live here, but I'm a mom, I've been here 6 years, and I can tell you that the budget, it's like a Super Bowl every year, right? You have to see, and we're planning, and no one wants to spend more. So I want what's best for the community, but what I know is that the resources are very tight. So if we're looking for making sure they have academic success and we can really utilize our dollars for instruction, then my unified school allows us more opportunity. But it has to be intentional. I agree with you. I don't want my little pre-K, with fifth. That's just, it's not, unless we're doing peer mentors, which we do, like it's very intentional. So stage 3 becomes really, really important, as does stage 2. Once they decide on which one, then what we want to do is we have more community meetings. Some of you may have come last time, we held them in the high school library. We had kids and parents, school committee members, town council members. Actually, Ryan celebrated us for having the most number of feedback presented. We gave out the link for those who couldn't attend. We did the presentations on YouTube. We did the overview. But in the end, every year, I hear the same thing. And when I went back into the archives, dating back, I only went to 1975 elementary, but 1958 for the district. This conversation happens all the time. There's no money, And I don't unique for our students, it really doesn't provide that large field. And there's a lot of opportunities that we can share. Even in Maine, there's a really nice job of the rural sort of preservation of a larger school. This is not a unique opportunity. It maybe is unique in Rhode Island, but this is happening in a very intentional way across the nation. And I think it's pretty impressive. Like I said, I would not want my youngest in a unified school that looked like a high school. But I wouldn't mind if it was thoughtfully, intentionally spaced out, like you said, thinking about filling our youngest one is with our upper elementary being separated, but allowing those intentional opportunities, you know, where we have shared opportunities that would enhance their collaboration.
My last question is, and maybe this is more for Mr. Zimmerman, and provided you familiar with enough of the history, going back, I mean, we can go back to the main campus improvement, and where you have knowledge of going back further, has the district gone over budget on any of its major capital improvements?
Not that I'm aware. I believe most, I've lived in the district for 26 years and worked there for 21. I believe everything has come in on budget or under budget. And I believe the last two bonds, money was returned.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I've been in this community for again, over 20 years, 25 years, and I think I know the community well enough that if the voters approved the bond project, capital improvement project, and they went over budget, you'd hear a lot of screaming. So,
There's a building committee that dictates every dollar that is spent once the bond is approved, and they are the on-hawks, and always have been. I've been on multiple building committees, and now I work on the other side of it. And there, I can tell you, there's not 2 nickels that are spent in this district without serious conversation, and it is spent on what is voted on, and the building committee is always looking out for the students and the taxpayers.
So in the building committee, to Rick's point, so in the Charahoe Act, the school committee makes all the decisions up until the bond passes. Once a bond passes for the Charahoe Act, either the bond or new construction, a building committee must be formed. That building committee must be 3 members from each town from the school committee and 3 members appointed by the town councils. So then that building committee starts at stage 3, and we go through the RFP for the architect, the OPM, all that again to begin the stage 3 process to actually build the school you want. And they are very, very, firm on holding that line.
I remember when you were talking about either renovating or doing new construction on Charlestown, you're saying you run into issues with like a mountain and ledge and things like that, and that would be more stressful or cost more money. So let's say we're going with option 1. Are we going, how much are we digging to find out what's in the earth? How do we know that that's not going to pose all these extra costs?
Because we have to do the work in stage 2. So we have to hire somebody to go out and do test borings. So we need to get a geotech report.
So we might find it's not the right spot, or we might find it will cost a lot more than that.
You would find out if it's suitable soils for bearing, for instance, if it's hazardous soils, remediation that might be in place. That happens in stage 2. No matter what scheme or option gets chosen, we still think that legwork. The problem we have is we can't drill through the floor either. So I have no idea what's in there.
But this has a lot
But
of
it would cost more
landfills and
money,
wetlands.
is what, like, wouldn't a certain spot that has, not the easiest topography potentially cost more money, and is that factored into that price, is my question?
These are, no is the simple answer, but it's more complex. So I don't have a site for each of those. So I'm assuming it has the same level of remediation as every other project would have that would come
Okay.
in the same area.
So, okay.
And we've been all over the communities, we've done so, anytime we've done good work, we've been all over this area to know what your soil conditions and bearing conditions are like. So they're generally pretty straightforward, legislation.
Okay. And then my other question was for Ms. Picard, when you were speaking before, you were saying the same amount of students would be, like if we were going to go with option 2 or option 3, you said everyone is at the school that's closest to them and it would stay that way. And my understanding was that when Hope Valley closed, the majority of the students were here because there was more room in the school, not because it was closest.
No, we actually did the map, we had the bus drivers, actually Lillian came out and did it for the entire community, and then she did it again for the school committee. What we did was we sort of drew that map around Richmond, Ashland, and Charlestown. We looked at where all the students lived, and we moved them to the closest residence possible. Now, there's some people moving in, and they're like on the outskirts, and maybe the road doesn't exist on the map, and because it's really not necessarily a road, so we figure out where that sort of route goes. But overall, we have to review that every year anyway. So if by chance something had to move on a line for schools, we would then start it with any newly enrolled or kindergarten.
Am I the only one who heard that the majority of the kids were going to Richmond because there were more classrooms here?
Yeah.
That was what.
I don't know, not for you to hear that.
Okay.
They do have more classrooms here, but Ashway's only fits so many. So when we designed it, it was based on the closest school, starting in kindergarten.
Yeah, so I would say about the redistricting, so you're saying you already redistricted, and if those three schools, if we were to go with option two, that would mean these kids would stay there. Well, Richmond does that significantly more than the rest of the schools. So we're paying that much money to make bigger schools so that all three schools are the exact same size, but this school has so much more. Why wouldn't we just, and I understand that you've chosen to go with these three options, I really wish there had been an option for just two schools. Make Charlestown bigger, let Charlestown have their building that they really want. We already, and then actually make the schools even in kids.
So that's
then it would be worth it to make that school that big, and then we'd only be looking at around 70 million.
That wasn't one of the options the school committee put forward.
And I wish that it had been, I wish that had been something that, that's all I want to say. I wish that was an option right now.
But remember, if you're renovating
If you're looking
new,
at 70 million, I think we'd have less than 3 people. Than looking at all of them.
if you're gonna look to renovate, regardless, the schools all have to be the same size. So again, if
Exactly, which is why I think that's a waste for Ashland.
and
Be that big.
well, actually, Ashway has the highest class sizes they always have. Ashway is the one school that's at half, 25.
Because they have
They
less
have
classes.
Right, that's what I'm point.
Well,
You
we have
have to,
500 kids here, they do not.
if you can remember that, you're not talking about kids now, you're talking about kids in 2029. So if there's a change in where the parents are living, and we had to do any rerouting, it would start for new students in the district or kindergarten coming up.
I'm gonna say I wish two schools was enough.
I understand.
Gene, two questions for Gene. You just mentioned student planning throughout 2029, or for the future. Currently, it's 1,281, is that right?
I'm sorry.
How many students do we have currently?
So, I'm sorry.
How many students do we have?
So right now, for the pre-K through 4, there's about 1281.
Okay, and what's the future plan for the next 30 years?
So actually, we're gonna be getting those numbers, so we have to go out for our next 10-year study, so that we can share that with you once we get that in October.
Okay, just curious if it's gonna be an order of magnitude or just a couple of percent perhaps? I mean, really, as Helen mentioned, are, like this.
We lose about one, it's not as big as something like South Kingstown or Westerly, where they've lost a lot. We seem to lose about 1%, but it's not in one area, so it doesn't show up because if you lose 2 first graders and 3 fifth graders and 9th graders,
I understand. What's an estimate from the contractor? I mean, what's an estimate? 1,300, 1,400? No idea. Okay.
right now, based on the NESIC numbers we have from the last stage 2, which was last 2 years ago,
Right.
it's 1281 with just pre-K through 4.
Okay, and that's, so great. Another question, just real quick about busing. With the unified plan, have you done the analysis on how much it will save in terms of busing and ground transportation?
No, because I need to know if the school committee is going to change policy to ensure that I understand the transportation expectations. So once I know how far, how long they want the students on the bus, then we can do that. Right now, we are going for a larger transportation analysis with the state to see if we can just save dollars based on our current enrollment. Then we'll do that additional analysis once, if policy changes.
Okay, great, thank you.
I just have a question about heating. Have you have a plan with those buildings of how you're heating them? Because if you're heating them with electricity, is will gonna be stopped?
That hasn't been determined yet.
Like that building committee will determine that.
What we have to provide to you are three options and cost analysis on those options. Whatever option is selected, not all three, but whatever option is selected on the 21st, we contractually and RIDE expects our
Whatever
engineering
option,
team.
what?
Whatever option the school committee determines on the 21st, in our stage 2, we would have to work with RIDE to make sure we understood, we had that plan moving forward in that stage 2 application.
So we're not being required by the legislature or RIDE to put electricity in the school, to make them electric heat.
No, they do like
Efficiency.
efficiency, so
They do like electric heat, which is what
Water
outrageous.
lines are off, I think, $3.
Yeah,
So,
it's just visual.
So Mark, I think when I'm hearing a lot of things from the community tonight, but I think one of the things that I'm hearing resonate with some folks is the integrity of the enrollment numbers and how we're going to identify that data and how that translates into how the design moves forward depending on what selection, what option the school committee chooses to pursue in October, the October school committee meeting, which is October 21st. So if Gina or maybe Greg or maybe anyone from Colliers, have you ever encountered a situation in any of your clients, other school districts, that was sort of a question mark about what size school you were planning for based on moving targets for enrollment numbers?
So what I'll say is, we have a lot. It's a stage 3 question. Because when I come on and design architect to complete or implement the stage 2 master plan, I immediately challenge, look at your census numbers for that October, and say, we did it for Newport, right? You were the architect for Newport. What we did in Newport is we got them the most amount of money they could get from the state at the reimbursement rate at that time. When we designed the school in the end in stage 3, because we also did their stage 2, we shrunk the school based on what we knew or know was happening. They were losing 100 kids, CPE programs outside their district, their enrollment was down. We worked with Mario and Rye to make sure they were with agreements with what we were doing, right? NESDEC is an imperfect science, that number, but it is a great number. It gives you the most amount of money in square footage to get through RIDE. Then you figure out, Mario will tell you, when he comes here to start at stage 3, figure out how to spend the dollars you have wisely. It's not necessarily stage 2. That was a master plan decision you made on a direction. When it gets implemented, it's usually quite different.
And so my final question to that is NESDEC proactively communicating with the cities and towns, like for us it would be Richmond, Hopkinton, and Charlestown, to project out things like Bushy Brook, or like housing developments, so that those numbers are as real as possible?
When they look at birth rates, they look at death rates, they look at parental, they do the whole thing, and then we ask for it every year now.
Okay, and then on a separate topic, just for me, I'm one of 12 on the school committee, so obviously I represent one vote, my vote, right? So what's important to me is, and one of the things that I talked to Gina about and her team in January when I came on the school committee was, how realistic is it to get the 5th graders back into the elementary school? And at that point, she said, it really wasn't realistic because we weren't involved in this process at this level. So now when I hear that the only option to include 5th graders back into the elementary school is option 1. Is that correct?
It is the easiest
It
option.
is, but the other two, I'm not gonna say this, anything is possible, right? You never know what, because the General Assembly can change things, but it would be a very hard sell to say how we were going to represent the same programs 3 times every year.
So I'll tell you from the site capacity component, you will not fit 5th grade on a renovated addition. The sites are just too small.
When
And you can't parking the drop-offs. If you were to build 3 new schools on those sites, yes. Instead of 2 stories, I'd have to go 3 stories. That's a commitment of a different type of building in the town that you would have to agree to, right? But it's possible. It's certainly easy you're in a unified school, you have more area to play with, site-wise, to make it work, to make efficiency.
But you have to go to 3 floors.
I go on.
Right, okay. Thank you, that's, for me, that's a big deal. Thank you.
Absolutely.
You said it, which would be the easier option, option one?
Yes.
To move fifth graders.
Because you could guarantee parity across the district and ensure everybody had equal opportunity and access.
Yes.
My guess is if I asked everyone here if they wanted to join a commune so we could share a kitchen and a boiler, y'all wouldn't be so into it. It would probably save a lot of money. For me, elementary school is about small communities. It's about children walking another child to the nurse, not in their own separate wings, not in their own separate schools, not cut off from everybody. It's about elders of the community, 4th or 5th grade, helping the younger kids. And if we all wanted to save money, kids are pretty expensive. We shouldn't have them. And as for international schools doing better, internationally, everyone learns other languages. We don't.
I guess and I hear you,
Yeah.
Anna, I guess my response to that would be is that the reality of our school district is that we are a regional school district. We're not a town, one town. So I think if you're looking at one town to have, like your province, Sheena had how many elementary schools before you?
We had 6.
We have 6. So if we are truly a regional a regional school district, then, and we're not behaving like a regional school district, it's a catch-22 for us. I think that we have to, as school committee members, hear your feedback and process that. And
Are you speaking of the parity or what exactly?
Definitely the parity, but I mean, what you said earlier was about the community aspect, and I agree that part of a community are strong elementary schools, but because we are a regional school district, I think it's very hard for folks to potentially get behind a unified school because for how many years we've had community schools.
No, I can't get behind it because what's better for young children is small communities that they feel ownership of. And here at Richmond, we are so overstuffed, and it's not because of the space. We are so overstuffed that the ice cream social, parents were walking in and leaving because it's too overwhelming, and that's adults. So I don't think the solution is then to say, okay, well, we won't ever do events all together, and we'll keep this grade alone, and we'll keep this grade alone. Why are we living in a small town if our kids can't have that community school experience, be it regional or individual by town?
Well, I appreciate your feedback on that, and when I hear the superintendent say that it's very important to be intentional with the space, I would think that other towns that are going from 6 schools to 2 schools are trying to do that, and that there's probably examples that you could bring to the table where other cities and towns have done that, and there may be some sort of transitional growing pains or pains in that kind of a transition, but suffice it to say that I think we have a very big decision coming forward on October 21st, and we just want to hear everybody's point of view.
I guess I'm hearing a lot of how much it'll cost and what the scores will be, and I'm not hearing anything about social, emotional, and what's actually best for young children to learn in. What environments are actually best for young children to learn in. And I know a lot of I know it's not necessarily covered here, but I know a lot of what we need to come up to speed with is we're technological now. School, kids are on Chromebooks. There's a whole lot more technology, which studies, since 2020 put childhood and schooling online. And the studies are not in for how good that is for children. Some studies are in, and it's not that great. And other school districts in other towns and other states are saying, we need to get kids off of screens. We need to not be giving kindergartners Chromebooks and things like that. So renovating a school to be up to technological standards, that there are no long-term studies on how good they are for our children is not a big, of course we need to be able to accommodate the needs of today and of the future. But if we are looking at things that there are not long-term studies on, I'm not quite sure why there are. There are long-term studies on the kinds of environments that young children thrive in.
And I would love to hear if there are any educators of our districts, Sharon is here, maybe offline, but I'm sure the school committee would love to hear, feedback from the educators about, to Hannah's point.
So educational research, one, and I'm someone that does this. So I would ask for the study, I would ask for how is it replicable, who was the one that did the study. I have a lot of research that I can share, and it's less, but what you said was true, the connectedness, the relationship building, but it's not about small or big. So that's not fair because it exists in those communities, but I understand that change is hard, and it's what we're used to, and it's what you feel, sometimes small isn't good, because what happens is even at Ashway, there's less opportunities sometimes because it's so small, and there's only two. But I think when we sort of put it out there, and we think for the neutral, if you want to go through the research, then I only ask that when you utilize it, that you share it, so that we can, because I'm going to share mine. And it's not fair to the public if we say things that aren't accurate, aren't factual, or aren't replicated by thoughtful statisticians. Because we can all say something isn't going to work until, you need to provide that evidence. And one example is, like we said, there are districts across the state, forget international if you want to do international, across the nation that have done this and have done this well. It is about, I agree with you, I'm a big believer in mental health. All of our SLs, if not the majority, went through mental health, trauma informed, and as we build those systems, that's only going to help us. And I agree with you, parents don't want to come to multiple different events if they have a kindergartner and then a first grader and then a fourth grader, because I have that. I have 3 different children at different ages. But there's ways to do that in these spaces that our lots don't allow us to do because they're already so compacted. Like Richmond's got beautiful land, but there's wetlands, which is why we can't build large on Richmond. But I do think that if the community provides us with their opportunity, so if you're looking and you're thinking, 3 schools is better, then that's what we want you to share in a way that allows everyone to be objective and thinking through the opportunity. What I know is, we need to be fiscally responsible no matter what plan we do, but most importantly, we need to design it for student success. And it can be designed for student success when you think about your intentional spacing. But that's why your voice is very important in this process. So we have to do something. So one of these has to happen because we cannot continue with only getting $500,000 because we're emergency spending and we don't have a capital improvement plan and we're going on year 6. So our youngest learners deserve that, our staff deserve that, and they need to be in spaces that they don't have to leave the town. And I've heard that. These facilities are old, like when are you guys going to update, when are you going to do this? And they've left. And so maybe you're talking to different people. I can share with you who I've spoken to, that literally, I know, some of our people who work at the central office talk about their neighbors leaving just because there's no decisions to put dollars into our schools in a way that's going to make sure we have 21st century learning outcomes for teachers. But I think there's no one decision, there's no one way to do it, and that's why we're here tonight to make sure we hear your, and I get it, for you, and it's really mental health, social emotional learning, and that connected relationship that you want to ensure, regardless of the plan, that we ensure is a cornerstone of our plan.
Yes, which I don't think would really be possible.
I'm not kidding, I understand.
Have you really known a building that has been designed, like I was saying, where it's almost 2 schools within one, but very much like the K2 or pre-K2, pre-K1, whatever, versus the older kids?
Yeah, and what I showed you is like one step away from that.
Well, that reminds me more of like our current middle school, where 5 and 6 pretty much only are together, 7 and 8 are very much together, but then
So,
they share like the middle.
Again, we put grades on because we have to just show something in capacity for that, but you can mix it up. I really don't care whatever the educational.
Like the educational program is that stage 3, and I know it feels like we've never gotten there, so it's kind of hard to explain something that no one has seen yet. Because again, remember, this only started in 2018. So it's new for a lot of districts, but a lot of districts have taken the opportunity to access the dollars that are also your dollars
is there a way to make two schools on the same property somehow connected so that it's one building, but very much more like a two-school feeling?
Well, obviously, two schools are, yes, but that wasn't one of the options that Sling was asking.
But,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I think you're referring to one building, but looks like two buildings inside.
Oh, yes.
So I teach at Exeter West Richmond Junior High School.
Yes,
There you go. And so one side is the high school, grades 9 to 12, and then the other side is grades 7 and 8. And it's very easy. The blue is junior high, red is high school, and green is mixed. So we share spaces like auditorium, and library, and music area. They have separate cafeterias and separate gymnasiums, and so it's one building from the outside.
I see what you're saying, one out.
So if,
Thank you, Karen.
if that shows option 1 and 2, we would have community group sessions with you to figure that out, planning sessions. We're required to have them.
Very glad to hear what you're saying and totally agree. But, and when we were talking about this the last time, I'll be very frank and say that I was not opposed. It wasn't even an option for me, and I'm coming around to it personally. And I think that there's ways to make it work and people to be on board if it was done very intentionally.
On the feedback,
And
we're gonna specifically ask that question, like, if I wouldn't select any of these, tell us why, because like, I'm glad that Karen understood the clarity of what you were saying, thank you, Karen, because yes, you would have, what you're saying is that unified space, but two schools on that property, and in essence, it's really one school, but it's intentionally designed like we have at PWG does.
I like two lunchrooms, I like two gyms, and I know maybe that's not fully going to be reimbursed, but it might still be cheaper than 3 new schools, right? I don't know.
And that's what part of the design we're doing.
I think he has a question, then can I make a comment, because I think people are missing something?
Sure.
Mr. Rose, thank you for being here and helping us out. 2 questions, and before I ask the 2 questions, I'd like to thank this lady for giving kids first. As a parent with 3 kids who went to a small neighborhood school in Western Coventry, it was the best investment the town ever made in my kids. Not only the kids, but in the teachers. Not only the teachers, but in the parents. And then the whole community. It was phenomenal. We built our own playground for the school. We landscaped the school. And on and on and on. You've got something that I wish we could hear more of. That kids are first. And obviously they were missing in this conversation. But the 2 questions, Mr. Rose, are 1, can you name the companies, the construction companies that gave you these numbers?
So at this stage, I'm not allowed to talk to a construction company. So we use a third-party estimator, which is the state requirement. So it's somebody we hire that does a lot of the estimating. What do I use? Myakoda is the company. Myakoda is the company.
So no construction company actually gave you these numbers?
Correct.
Just an estimated
we
number.
we are designing and building a lot of the state schools, so I have a lot of active numbers. I understand what's going on. I work with Gildan a lot. I work with Shawmut. I work all over the country. I do work a lot regionally. So we do have active projects. We know what's going on with the labor force. We know what's going on with the material selection. You have to be very purposeful given sort of the issues that are around transportation, getting materials. The number of masons, used to be ton masons that are around, there are a lot less, but still enough to support the work that's there.
So I'll take that as a no. And for the second question, for all the projects that you've done, in Rhode Island or all around the country, what is your success rate in terms of coming in within or under budget and on time? Or more specifically, how many schools in Rhode Island have failed to come in within or under budget and on time?
An interesting question. So I will say Newport is the outlier for lots of reasons. I'm not going to get into that in the public forum. But most of the other, I would say all the other schools that come in with money to spare.
All the schools are not products.
Yes, we're doing our products right now. South Kingstown, it's first bid for $6 million. So first phase are under, what we're hearing.
We're under in Middletown as well.
Okay. So there seems to be the frenzy in the marketplace has gone a little bit, and we're back to this predictable understanding of what escalation is going to be. Because coming out of the pandemic, escalation numbers were 10 to 20%, depending on material sources, labor shortages, shipping shortages, all the architects in CN sort of abandoned product coming from overseas because we just couldn't get it. So we've ended up looking at more regional products, which is probably the right thing to do anyways. For feed and sustainability, instead within 500 radius of where that project's up to.
So given your track record of success, which sounds extraordinary, can you guarantee?
There's no guarantee.
I'm not in the business of guarantee. But I owe you in stage 2 something different in stage 3. If you were to hire someone to do stage 3, we would have to design a school to the budget you know, regardless. I would own redesign that school to hit that number if it bid over.
So Mark, I think a lot of people are missing why we're here and what stage 2 is versus stage 3. So whether you want a unified school, 3 new schools, or 3 renovated schools, the architect is here, and if you want something different than those 3 options, that's not what the school committee charged the architect with doing. So stage 2, the architect's job is to design the ultimate amount that RIDE will reimburse us for. When we get to stage 3, if RIDE says they're gonna give you $120 million and you agree to 3 new schools, then you have $120 million to build those 3 new schools. You can redesign them however you want, up to $120 million reimbursable. After that, you pay dollar for dollar. So what you don't want your architects to do is undermine you in stage 2, and most of what we're talking about here is really a stage 3 conversation, which we haven't had at the elementary level because we never got past the stage 2 since I've been here. So, you know, I think the bigger thing is, conceptually, which one do you want? Where do you want your kids to go to school? And that's where you have to make your argument to your school committee. Because on October 21st, they are going to decide. And they are going to spend more money to move forwards, probably on to get a stage 2 approved.
And it's money going to planning, not an investment in your facility.
So, question on timeline. So, option 1, you're going to disrupt the existing elementary school stay functional. Then how long option 1 takes to build out that new school? Just ballpark, 3 years?
It's probably 3 years. Brian's process, you have to, at every stage, map design development, construction, 60% CD, you have to submit to them and they review. That can take up to 30 days, so it does have a lot of time.
So option 2, what do we do with the children during that period? How long does that last?
Yeah,
Is that
option
2 years, 3 years?
Yeah, option 2 is probably more than 5 years. That's the problem with the way we understand it, right? You have to be able to download enough students that you can take on more than one of those buildings at a time.
Each building should pick the other school. Doing one at a time.
Yeah.
What temporary space? Okay, and then option 3, we're looking at separate properties, new properties, you were saying, so we're not disrupting the schools.
No, I think we estimate on the same property.
Oh, existing, so it's similar to option 2, you're taking the school out, you're disrupting the schools for 2 to 3 years minimum. Okay, thank you.
Are you saying that when you're comparing, like, oh yeah, the kid budget or whatever, all of these towns in Rhode Island have all gone to a more unified elementary school? Is that what you're saying?
No, they've gone, so there was this whole thing, it was a point that used to be there, now it's not there. We were trying to really push the idea of getting rid of, there were a ton of 2-track schools scattered throughout North Providence. In fact, the stage 2 just completed, stage 3 we're now completing for them in construction. We looked at 3 schools, 3 new 2-track schools, because they wanted to neighborhood schools for lots of a variety of reasons. Transportation is a nightmare in North Providence, right? In the end, the community didn't like that solution. We went to 2 schools, one smaller, one bigger, not huge, but so instead of a 6-track school, we had like a their decision in stage 3, once we got the maximum dollar value for them, there was then an intentional discussion about how to provide the ed spec in the best way for the community. This stage 2 is a lot about master planning your facilities and a roadmap to your success, whatever that might be. It might be 1 school, it might be 3 schools, it might be something else. But what we were charged to do was to just show you in a sort of honest way, apples and apples, 3 options so you can see cost factors. I know the last time we did this, there was a lot of talk about costs. We wanted to be as blatantly honest as we could be about cost factors. We tried to keep them generally the same, except when there's an addition renovation or you're not even in a school before them.
I just want to say thank you guys for all the time that you have put into this, and this meeting has gone longer than we anticipated, so I appreciate the time you put into it. I think regardless of the decision, somebody's going to be unhappy. The reality is we have put this off for too long. We have not invested in our elementary schools in far too long, and so I think we have to, regardless of the decision the school committee makes, I think they need to hear our opinions, and then we need to support whatever decision that is, regardless of our personal opinions, because it's hurting the kids either way. Because their classrooms are flooding, they don't have the spaces they need, and the buildings just keep getting older. So I put that out, especially as you go back and you talk to your neighbors, because we have to do something. And if we fail this bond again, because some of us aren't happy with the final decision, it only impacts our kids. So I just want to say.
What she said. And I'll say, you know, obviously, everybody came together with a lot of ideas. We all have what we think is best for our children and the community. And the bottom line is, whatever we end up deciding to try and do, no one is going to be perfectly happy. But the bottom line is, you're right. We need to do something for our students. It's been probably 50 years since we've done anything for our elementary students. So,
And I will say the process does allow for a bunch of engagement with you all through the rest of stage 2 once something is decided, and then stage 3, whoever does that.
So we are going to have another Wednesday, and we're on back at the Orange also, and if you'd like to join us there, please come with more questions and bring your friends. I think the more input and the more feedback, the more likely we are to get to a community decision that feels right for our students and our youngest learners to maybe possibly able to grade 5. So thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you.